Hey, it's Lily here. You ever felt like you've been treated like you don't matter? That's how I felt at my sister-in-law's engagement party, where they called me a housekeeper. But you know what? I decided to play their game, and what happened next? They never saw it coming. I wasn't going to be invisible anymore, and trust me, they'd regret it. Hook 2. Ever been humiliated by your own family? At my sister-in-law's lavish engagement party, they called me a housekeeper. But instead of backing down, I played the part, and it was my turn to make them regret it. What happened next left my brother speechless. Want to know how I turned the tables? Stick around. This story is far from over. The lights of the mansion glittered like diamonds, reflecting the wealth and sophistication that filled every corner of the room. The marble floors gleamed under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, and the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, fine wine, and the subtle tension of a family event gone wrong. Yet, in the middle of all the laughter and chatter, I felt completely alone. I wasn't just another guest in the crowd. I was invisible, a shadow cast in a world that wasn't mine. I had always been on the outskirts of this world, the world of wealth and high society that Zoe, my sister-in-law, so easily fit into. And as the evening unfolded, I began to realize that I would always remain on the outside looking in, no matter how much I tried to be a part of it. Victor, my husband, was somewhere in the crowd, engaging in polite conversations with people I didn't know. He had been distant lately, even more so tonight. My nerves were on edge. I had spent hours getting ready, hoping that tonight would be different, hoping I could feel like I truly belonged with him, with his family. But deep down, I knew that was never going to happen. As I entered the grand ballroom, I was handed a name tag by a woman in a sharp black dress, her face expressionless. She barely looked at me as she clipped it to my jacket. When I glanced down at it, my stomach dropped. Instead of my name, it read, Housekeeper. I blinked, thinking it was a mistake. But no, it was real. A stark, cruel reminder of exactly how the family saw me. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't part of the celebration. I was nothing more than hired help. The humiliation hit me like a slap in the face. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, my body freezing in place. My thoughts raced, and I wondered how long they had been treating me this way. Was I always the outsider? My heart pounded in my chest as I scanned the room, feeling the stares of the guests as I stood there in shock. It wasn't just the name tag, it was everything. The way they looked at me, the way they ignored me, the way I was never enough for any of them. Trying to shake it off, I walked towards Victor, who was standing with a group of people, laughing about something I couldn't quite hear. I tapped him gently on the shoulder. He turned to look at me with a smile, his expression dull and distracted. Victor, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Why am I wearing this? I pointed to the name tag, my voice faltering. Why did they give me this? He chuckled, his eyes glazing over as if it were nothing. Food is for family, Evie, he said dismissively, waving a hand as though it were some trivial matter. You know how this goes. The words stung, and I felt my chest tighten. Family? Was that how he saw me now? As someone who didn't belong. Someone who wasn't good enough to even be treated with basic respect. My fingers tightened into fists at my sides, my heart swelling with a mixture of anger and sadness. But I didn't let it show. Not yet. I forced a smile, nodding, and walked away. The deep, aching hurt was growing inside of me. I hadn't expected sympathy, but this was worse than I could have ever imagined. I had always been second-rate to his family, but tonight, I had become invisible. As the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being swallowed whole by the opulence around me. I felt like a ghost, drifting in and out of conversations I didn't belong in. I could hear snippets of laughter and polite small talk, but they all felt so far away, as though I were watching a movie about someone else's life. And then, it hit me. I didn't have to play by their rules anymore. I didn't have to stay silent, to accept the humiliation, to smile and nod as if everything was okay. I could fight back, not with anger, not with words, but with strategy. I could play their game, and I could play it better than they ever could. As I stood there, my hands trembling slightly, I made a decision. I would become the housekeeper, but not in the way they thought. I would make them regret ever treating me like this. I would show them that I wasn't weak, that I wasn't just a prop in their world. I would take control. I walked to a quiet corner of the room, away from the guests, away from Victor and his family. I needed time to think, time to plan. My heart was still pounding in my chest, but now it was filled with something different. Not fear, not hopelessness. It was resolve. I wasn't going to let them strip me of my dignity. I wasn't going to let them make me small. I would make them regret every single time they had looked past me, every time they had treated me like I was nothing. They didn't realize it yet, but the tables were about to turn. The evening stretched on, and the elegant hum of conversation swirled around me like a thick fog. The laughter and clinking of glasses felt distant, as though I were watching someone else's life unfold. I leaned against the cold window pane, staring out at the glittering lights beyond. The mansion, the luxurious decorations, the extravagant guests, all of it felt like a cruel joke. I wasn't part of this world, no matter how much I tried to fit in. The humiliation from earlier still burned in my chest, but it was different now. The sting had dulled, replaced by a quiet, simmering rage that I had no intention of letting go. I had been relegated to the background for so long, invisible, overlooked. But now, something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to stay in the shadows anymore. I wasn't going to let them treat me like an outsider. Not anymore. I turned away from the window, my mind already working, calculating. I wasn't going to confront them directly. Not yet. I wasn't going to scream or cry or make a scene. No, I had something far more powerful in mind. Subtlety. I would play their game, but I would play it better. I would become the housekeeper they thought I was, but I would do it on my terms. I would use their dismissal of me as my weapon. As I moved through the crowd, the weight of my decision settled around me like a cloak. I would be invisible, unnoticed, but in control. It was a slow burn, a calculated revenge that would leave them with nothing but regret. They wouldn't see it coming. Zoe, my sister-in-law, walked by with a smile plastered on her face, her laughter echoing in the air. She didn't notice me. No one did. I was a shadow, a ghost in a room full of vibrant life. But the more I observed, the more I realized that this invisibility was my power. I could see everything. I could hear everything. And when the time was right, I would strike. My first opportunity came sooner than I expected. Zoe, with her usual air of superiority, walked over to me and handed me a small task. "Evie, can you help with setting up the dessert table? The guests are all ready for it." It was a simple request, seemingly innocuous. But to me, it felt like another slap in the face. I was being treated like one of the hired help, just another cog in the machine. But instead of refusing, instead of making a scene, I smiled. A calm, calculated smile that betrayed none of the anger I felt. I nodded, accepting the task with exaggerated precision. I moved with care, making sure to arrange each dessert just so, as though it mattered. As I worked, I kept my eyes open. I overheard snippets of conversation, snide remarks about my business, about how it was just a hobby to them. Zoe and Violet, my mother-in-law, laughed about it. I could hear the condescension in their voices, the way they belittled everything I had worked for. But I didn't react. Not yet. My heart beat faster with every word, but I remained calm. Every insult, every snub, only fueled the fire inside me. They were underestimating me, and they didn't even realize it. I couldn't help but watch Victor across the room, chatting animatedly with Rebecca, one of the guests. The way she laughed, the way she touched his arm, it stung. But I didn't let it show. Instead, I walked up to the bar and made sure to serve them both drinks. I wasn't just serving drinks, I was making a statement. I wanted Victor to see me, to see the woman he had married, reduced to nothing more than the hired help. I made sure to pause just long enough to lock eyes with him, my gaze cold and composed. He barely registered it, too busy basking in the attention of Rebecca. His indifference stung, but it also solidified my resolve. I wasn't the woman he thought I was. I wasn't the meek, quiet wife who would stand in the background while he flirted and laughed with others. I was going to turn this around. The night wore on, and the anger inside me grew, but it was no longer just anger. It was strategy. Each action I took was calculated, each word spoken with precision. They thought I was invisible, that I was nothing. But I was playing a role that would soon become their nightmare. As the evening drew to a close, I overheard another conversation between Zoe and Violet. They were talking about me again, this time planning to have me disappear from the upcoming family dinner. They didn't want me around, didn't want my presence to tarnish their perfect family image. The sting of their words cut deep, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I smiled to myself. They had no idea what I was capable of. I wasn't just a housekeeper, I whispered to myself. I was the one they would regret underestimating. And I was going to prove it. The hours after the engagement party were the longest of my life. The house felt too quiet, too still. The weight of everything that had happened hung in the air like an unspoken truth. I sat in my office, staring at the papers scattered across the desk. They seemed so insignificant now, compared to what I had just endured. My body ached from the long day, but it wasn't physical exhaustion that kept me up. It was the anger, the humiliation, the burning desire to do something about it all. The emotions I'd been holding back were like a storm, swirling inside me, threatening to burst forth. But I knew I couldn't let that happen. This wasn't about a knee-jerk reaction. This was about something bigger. I had been humiliated, stripped of any dignity, made to feel small and insignificant. But as I replayed every moment in my head, I realized something. They thought I was weak because I hadn't fought back. They thought I was a doormat, someone they could walk over without consequence. But what if I showed them just how strong I could be? What if I used their own treatment of me as my weapon? I wasn't going to just survive this. I was going to turn the tables, quietly, carefully, but with a resolve that would make them regret ever underestimating me. The first step was observation. I needed to understand them better. My family, my husband, the people who thought they knew me. I had to see where they were vulnerable, where they let their guard down. I spent the next few days watching, listening, learning. I noticed how my husband Victor treated me, cold, distant, like I was nothing more than an accessory. He needed me, yes, but only when it suited him. I was the one who picked up the pieces when he fell apart, the one who quietly supported him while he paraded around, acting like the world owed him everything. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how my family treated me. They all had their own little circles. Zoe with her perfect life, Violet with her endless judgments, and Victor with his self-serving attitude. I was the outsider, the one who didn't belong, and they never let me forget it. One evening, after a long day of mindless errands, Victor came home. He barely acknowledged me as I stood in the kitchen, preparing dinner. He'd been out with his friends all day, and I was left to clean up the mess, both literal and emotional. "Can you go to the store for me?" he asked, as though I didn't already have enough to do. "I need some stuff for the office." I didn't say anything right away. I just looked at him, the silence hanging thick in the air between us. His eyes barely met mine, as if he were too busy with his own thoughts to care. I nodded, and without another word, I grabbed my jacket. It wasn't about the errand, it was about the message. He had asked me because he expected me to do it. No questions, no complaints. That was my role, wasn't it? The obedient wife who didn't challenge him. But I wasn't going to be that anymore. I wasn't going to act like the submissive wife who followed every order without question. No, I was going to take control. Later that night, I found myself in the quiet of my office again, watching the reflection of the streetlights outside. I had just begun to scratch the surface of my plan, but the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about proving a point. It was about reclaiming my power, taking back what had been stolen from me. But as I sat there, something inside me hesitated. Was I becoming the person they wanted me to be? Someone cold, calculating, willing to do whatever it took to win. My conscience whispered doubts, but I pushed them aside. This was bigger than guilt. This was about survival. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Hey, it's Evie. Do you have a minute?" I spoke to an old friend from my business days, someone who knew me for who I was, not for what they thought I could be. I needed someone who saw my worth, someone who could remind me that I wasn't alone in this. We talked for hours, and the validation I got from her made everything feel a little less overwhelming. "I'm not crazy, right?" I asked, laughing bitterly. "I'm not just overreacting," she reassured me, and as we ended the conversation, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time: confidence. I wasn't just fighting my family. I had people who believed in me, who didn't see me as a housekeeper or a side note in their perfect lives. I wasn't going to be their punching bag anymore. I was going to take the lead. The next family gathering was coming up soon, and I knew it was time. I had to be prepared. They still didn't see me, didn't know what I was capable of, but that was going to change. I was going to play their game, on my terms. I wasn't going to be a bystander anymore. I stood up from my desk, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about taking back my dignity, about showing them that I wasn't going to let them control me. I was ready. The days after my last confrontation with Victor felt heavy, like I was holding my breath and waiting for the storm to hit. The air in the house felt thicker, the tension palpable. But there was something different now. For the first time, I wasn't just waiting for things to happen to me. I was planning. I had made a choice, and I wasn't going to let fear or doubt hold me back. Sitting at my desk late one night, I finally took a hard look at everything. My marriage, my family, my life. I had let this happen for so long, convincing myself that I was powerless, that maybe I wasn't enough. But that was a lie. I wasn't weak. I was strong. I just needed to realize it. I had always been the silent one, the one who accepted things as they were, quietly shouldering the burden of a marriage that felt more like an obligation than a partnership. But no more. I wasn't going to let this continue. I wasn't going to let Victor or anyone else make me feel small anymore. I looked at my reflection in the window, the city lights casting a soft glow across my face. I didn't recognize the woman in the glass, not completely, but I was getting there. The woman staring back at me wasn't the wife who cowered under the weight of her husband's indifference. She was the woman who was about to take control of her own destiny. But where to begin? I needed to make a statement, something that would force everyone to see me for who I really was. The idea started small, but as I thought it over, the plan took shape. I was going to start asserting myself, quietly at first, but in ways that would leave an undeniable mark. The next family dinner would be my stage, but I needed a way to prepare for it. I spent the following days gathering my thoughts, analyzing every interaction, every moment of neglect. I'd seen too much of their true colors, how they treated me as less than them, as if my contributions were nothing. But I wasn't going to be the background character anymore. I would make sure they saw me, really saw me, and they wouldn't like what they saw. Victor still hadn't changed. He was as distant as ever, still treating me like an afterthought. I didn't need to be his emotional support anymore. I had spent too many years doing that, putting my own needs aside. But not anymore. When he came home that evening, I could feel the weight of what was coming. He walked into the kitchen, expecting me to be there, as usual, making dinner, waiting for him to notice me. But I wasn't there to wait for him. "Can you grab my dry cleaning tomorrow?" he asked, as though it were a simple task. The same way he always asked, the same way he never even noticed how often I put his needs before mine. I didn't look at him immediately. I took my time, letting the silence hang in the air between us. Then, I nodded, but not with the usual enthusiasm. It wasn't defiance, not yet, but a quiet acknowledgement that things had changed. "I'll do it tomorrow," I said, my voice even, flat. Victor didn't seem to notice the shift. He just nodded and walked away, leaving me to prepare the meal he wouldn't appreciate. But this time, I wasn't going to be his emotional slave. I wasn't going to bend to his every whim anymore. The next day, I made a few phone calls to some old friends, people who knew me before all this, before the house, before the title of wife was a prison. People who saw me as more than just someone's partner. I shared my frustrations, testing the waters. And for the first time, I felt validated. I wasn't crazy for feeling this way. They believed in me, in what I could do. And that support made me feel like I had the strength to keep going. It wasn't just about Victor anymore. It wasn't even about my family. It was about me reclaiming my life. The dinner came quickly. I dressed carefully, choosing my outfit with precision. I had no intention of blending in. This was my moment. The table was set, the guests arrived, and the atmosphere was as tense as ever. But this time, I wasn't just another face in the crowd. I was present. I was visible. We sat down to eat, and as the conversation flowed around me, I felt the familiar sting of being dismissed, of being treated like I didn't belong. Victor made a snide comment about something trivial, and for the first time, I didn't laugh along with him. I didn't brush it off. I looked at him, and then I looked around the table at my family. They all sat there, oblivious to the storm that was brewing. Then it happened. I stood up, not forcefully, but with purpose. I felt every eye in the room turn toward me. "I'm done," I said, my voice steady. "I'm done pretending that I'm okay with being treated like this." The room went silent. I felt a wave of power rush through me. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't worried about their judgment. I wasn't concerned about maintaining the peace. Victor's eyes widened and his face flushed. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the way you all treat me," I said, my voice unwavering. "The way you treat me like I'm invisible, like I'm just here to serve everyone else's needs. Well, I'm not just here to clean up your mess anymore. I'm not going to be the housekeeper anymore." The words stung like a slap in the face, but they were true, and it felt good to say them. Victor didn't respond right away, and the silence hung thick in the air. But his mother, Violet, couldn't stay silent for long. "Don't be dramatic, Lily," she sneered, the same condescending tone she always used. "You're overreacting." That was it. I felt the last shred of my patience snap. The frustration that had been building for so long exploded, but this time, I didn't let it consume me. I stayed calm, but the intensity of my words was clear. "I'm not overreacting. I'm done letting you all walk all over me. You think I don't see it? You think I don't know how little you value me? Well, I'm done being your doormat." The words hit harder than any physical blow could have. And for the first time, I didn't care about their opinions. I had finally said what needed to be said. As I turned to leave the room, my heart raced, but I felt a strange sense of peace. This was the turning point. I had taken control, and nothing was going to stop me now. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong. It wasn't just the constant weight of being overlooked or treated like I didn't matter. It was something deeper, something hidden. The feeling gnawed at me, and I knew that I had to dig deeper to get to the truth. The house had grown quiet after the last confrontation. Victor had retreated into his usual distant self, avoiding eye contact and any real conversation. I was still furious, but there was something else now. An unsettling calm, a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt before. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was preparing for something bigger, something that would change everything. I spent days replaying the events in my mind, how they had treated me, how my family had dismissed me as nothing more than an accessory to their perfect lives. But it was more than that. It was the betrayal I had overlooked for so long, the way Victor had used me, manipulated me, and gaslighted me into thinking I wasn't worth more. But no more. I wasn't going to let him or anyone else take me for granted again. I had to uncover the truth. Late one evening, after Victor had gone to bed, I dug through his desk drawer, carefully pulling out papers and documents I had never thought to look at before. There it was. Something that made my blood run cold. A bank statement. And not just any statement, but one that showed money transfers to a secret account. My heart hammered in my chest. I didn't need to know more to understand what was happening. My husband had been hiding money, and it was clear that he had been doing it for years. Money that should have been ours. I wasn't surprised, but I was furious. This wasn't just about the housekeeper label anymore. This was about betrayal on a scale I hadn't even fathomed, and it was my wake-up call. I knew that the moment I confronted him, things would change forever, but there was more. As I pieced together everything I had uncovered, I realized that this wasn't just Victor's secret. This was bigger. His mother, Violet, had been in on it too. They had both been using me, taking advantage of my quiet, patient nature. They thought I was just going to keep taking it, keep pretending I didn't see what was happening. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. The next day, I gathered the courage to speak up. I wasn't going to keep letting them walk all over me. I wasn't going to keep pretending everything was fine when it was clear that nothing ever was. When Victor came home from work, I was ready. He walked in, expecting his usual cold reception, but instead, I stood in the living room, holding the bank statements in my hand. "Victor, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady. I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't afraid. He looked at me, his eyes flicking nervously. "What is it now?" "This," I said, holding out the papers. "What's this?" "Why is there money going into a secret account? Why didn't I know about this?" Victor's face drained of color. For a moment, he opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He was caught, and he knew it. But as quickly as the shock registered, he tried to cover it up. "It's not what you think," he said, his voice laced with panic. "It's just business stuff, stuff that doesn't concern you." "Don't lie to me," I snapped, stepping closer. "I'm not stupid, Victor. I know exactly what's been going on. I've been your wife for years, and you've been lying to me the whole time. Hiding money, hiding everything." Victor's eyes shifted, and I could see the defensiveness building. He wasn't going to own up to any of it. But I wasn't backing down. "Why don't you tell me the truth, Victor? Why don't you tell me what this is really about?" His silence spoke volumes, and just when I thought he might come clean, his mother, Violet, walked into the room. She took one look at the papers in my hand and smirked. "You don't understand, do you?" she said, her voice cold and condescending. "This is how things work. You've been too blind to see it. You were never meant to be part of the family's business. You're just a trophy wife, a pretty face. Nothing more." The words hit like a slap. I stood there, shaking with anger, but something shifted inside me. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was done. I was done pretending that I didn't know my worth. I was done hiding in the shadows. "You think I'm nothing?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You think you can use me, manipulate me, and I'll just sit here and take it? No, I'm done. I've had enough." Victor stood there, silent, his jaw clenched. I could see him processing what was happening, realizing that I wasn't the same woman he had married. I wasn't going to let him control me anymore. "You're right about one thing," I said, my voice now steady and firm. "You never really saw me, but you're going to. You're going to see exactly what I'm capable of." I turned away from them and walked out of the room, my heart racing, but my mind clear. This was my turning point. I was no longer the passive wife who let things slide. I had the truth now, and I was going to make them all regret underestimating me. I wasn't going to let anyone use me ever again. The moment had come. I had reached a point where the weight of everything, every lie, every manipulation, was too much to bear. The truth I had uncovered, the pieces of the puzzle that had fallen into place, left no room for doubt. I was done hiding, done waiting for someone to make things right. It was time for me to take the lead. I had everything I needed, the evidence, the knowledge, and the resolve to do what had to be done. Victor had no idea what was coming. He thought I was still the same woman who tolerated everything, who smiled through the pain. But that woman was gone. I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom, the silence of the house almost suffocating. There was a coldness in me now, something sharp and clear. I wasn't afraid anymore. There was no turning back. When I entered the living room, I could already feel the tension in the air. Victor was sitting on the couch, flicking through his phone, while Violet lingered nearby, watching me with that judgmental, dismissive gaze she always had. They both looked up as I approached, their expressions unreadable, but I could feel their unease. "You've been avoiding me," I said, my voice steady, "but I've been doing some digging of my own." Victor put his phone down, looking at me as though he were trying to assess whether I was serious. "What's this about, Lily?" His voice was calm, but I could hear the edge to it. He knew something had shifted. "I know about the money, Victor," I continued, not letting my gaze waver. "The secret account, the transfers. I know what you've been hiding from me." For a moment, there was silence. Then, Violet stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "You don't know what you're talking about. There's nothing to explain." But I wasn't backing down. No, I do know, I said, pulling out the bank statements from my bag. I threw them on the table in front of them, watching as their faces paled. I've known for a while, actually, but I decided to let you dig your own grave. Victor's mouth tightened into a thin line, his usual confident demeanor cracking for a moment. Violet shot him a glance, but he remained silent. I could feel their discomfort rising. What is this, Lily? You're making a big deal out of nothing, Victor finally said, trying to brush it off, but his voice lacked the certainty it once had. You don't get it, do you? I asked, my anger rising but under control. I'm not just upset about the money. I'm tired of being treated like a second-class citizen. I'm tired of being invisible, of being the help in my own house. I'm not a housekeeper, Victor. I'm your wife. I took a breath, letting the words sink in, and when I looked at him, I saw the walls go up again, his familiar indifference creeping back into his expression. But there was something else now, something I could finally name. Fear. Look, Lily, he began, his voice low. I didn't mean for things to go this far, but you've got to understand, this is how things work. You don't get to change the rules now. I couldn't believe it. The audacity, the arrogance. You really think that, don't you? I said, my voice laced with disbelief. You think I'm going to sit here and let you walk all over me? Violet stepped in, her words like a slap. You think you can change anything? You've always been just a shadow in this family. You've never truly belonged. And that was it, the final straw. That's when it all clicked. This wasn't just about Victor. This wasn't just about Violet. This was about all of them. My entire life spent fighting for validation from people who never truly saw me. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the years of pent-up frustration, hurt, and anger flooding to the surface. But this time, I wasn't going to break. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to fight. You think I don't belong? I asked, my voice icy. I'm done pretending that this is okay. I'm done playing the role you want me to play. Victor stood up then, his face twisted in frustration. You're being irrational. This isn't the way to handle things. You know what, Victor? I said, stepping closer to him. You've always tried to control everything. Well, I'm done. I'm done living under your thumb. I'm done letting you decide my worth. For a moment, there was nothing but the heavy silence between us. Then, with a final, steady breath, I made my decision. I'm leaving, I said simply, but the words felt like they carried the weight of everything I had endured. I'm done. I don't need this. I'm not going to be a part of this family's games anymore. I turned to Violet, her face full of contempt. You've always seen me as less than, but not anymore. I'm done being your pawn. I walked out of the living room, heading straight for the door, my heart pounding, my body moving on instinct. But as I reached for the doorknob, I felt something inside me shift. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. This was the end of my old life, the old me. I was reclaiming my power. I was walking away from everything that had kept me small, from the lies and the manipulation, from the family that never saw me for who I truly was. But as I opened the door to leave, I heard Victor's voice, shaky with frustration. You'll regret this, Lily. But I didn't, not for a second. Not this time, I said, my voice stronger than I had ever felt. I won't be coming back. And with that, I stepped into the unknown. I stood in front of the mirror, my reflection staring back at me, the same face, but someone entirely different. The person who had walked into this life so many years ago, filled with uncertainty and blind loyalty, was gone. In her place was a woman who had learned to stand tall, to fight, to take control. The journey had been long and painful, but now it was time to take the final step. I was done with regret, done with the shadow I had let myself be. This was my moment. The silence of the house around me only heightened the noise in my mind. But now, as I looked at myself, I didn't feel fear. No, I felt resolve. I knew the steps I had to take, the risks I was about to embrace. It wasn't about walking away from the past anymore. It was about walking into my future. It was time to set everything in motion. The evidence I had gathered, the betrayals I had uncovered, all of it had brought me here. But there was still one final piece to the puzzle. The last betrayal, the thing that had fueled the final fire inside me. Victor's business partner, someone I had once trusted, was a part of this all along. The realization hit me hard, but it was also the clarity I needed. This had never just been about me. It had always been about control. Control they had tried to take from me for years. I took a deep breath and grabbed the documents from the table, the ones that sealed my fate. It was time to go to Victor, to confront him for the last time, and end this. I walked into the living room, where Victor sat, his back to me, unaware of the storm approaching. When he turned around, he saw me standing there, not the defeated woman he had grown used to, but a woman who had found her strength. I could feel the moment hang in the air between us. "Lily, what is it now?" His voice had that same dismissive tone, the one I had come to hate over the years. "You think you can keep manipulating me forever, don't you?" I said, the words flowing freely, each one more confident than the last. "You've been lying to me, using me, and all along you've been planning to shut me out. You thought I wouldn't find out, but I did." Victor's expression hardened, but he didn't say anything. I took a step closer, not backing down, not shrinking under the weight of his gaze. "You and Mark," I said, watching his face turn pale. "You thought I wouldn't discover the truth about your little financial games, your secret accounts. But I did. I know exactly what you've been doing." The room seemed to shrink around us. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out at first. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't waiting for him to explain himself. He had used his words too many times as a weapon, but now, silence was my weapon. "You always thought you had the upper hand," I continued, my voice steady. "But the truth is, you never had control over me. You never did." Victor finally spoke, his voice laced with frustration. "You don't know what you're talking about. This is business, Lily. You never understood that." I laughed bitterly. "Business? That's how you justify everything, isn't it? Using people to get ahead, leaving a trail of destruction in your wake. Well, I'm done being your pawn. You can keep your business and your lies. I'm walking away." He stood up then, anger flashing across his face. "You think you can just walk away? You think you have the power to take everything I've built from me?" I met his gaze, not flinching. "No, I'm not taking anything. You never built it with me in mind. You built it on my back, and I'm done carrying you." The words were final, and just like that, everything changed. Victor looked at me, his face a mixture of disbelief and rage. "You'll regret this, Lily." He spat, but I didn't flinch. Not this time. "No," I said calmly, "I won't." I turned to leave. The door was just a few steps away, but I felt like I was walking towards the beginning of something bigger than myself. There was no turning back. When I stepped outside, I stood there for a moment, letting the cool night air fill my lungs. This was it. The end of the life I had lived for so long, the life that had been nothing more than a series of compromises, lies, and broken promises. I didn't know what tomorrow held, but I knew one thing. It was mine to shape. I walked away from the house, from everything that had held me down for years, and I didn't look back. I didn't have to. I stood at the window, watching the rain fall steadily outside. The steady rhythm of the drops against the glass was strangely calming, a stark contrast to the chaos I had endured over the past months. In the silence of the house, I could finally breathe. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more pretending to be someone I wasn't. The storm outside mirrored the one inside me, but I wasn't drowning in it anymore. I had stepped out of the shadows of my past, and now I was learning to live in the light. The weight of everything I had been through, every betrayal, every harsh word, still pressed against me. But I felt different now. I felt free. But there were still moments when the past crept up on me, when doubt would flicker in the back of my mind. Was leaving the right choice? Had I done enough, or had my actions been driven by nothing but pain and anger? That evening, I sat alone in the living room, a cup of tea in hand. The warmth of the mug seeped through my fingers, a small comfort against the chill of my thoughts. I had made decisions that had torn my world apart, but now I saw those choices differently. I wasn't just running away, I was running toward something, toward the woman I was becoming. Healing wasn't an instant thing. It wasn't a clean break, a snap of the fingers, and everything was fine. No, it was messy, full of twists and turns, but every step, every hard choice had brought me here, and I was finally okay with that. The phone buzzed on the coffee table, pulling me from my thoughts. I stared at it for a moment, then picked it up, my heart skipping a beat when I saw the name. Victor. I hadn't expected him to call. In truth, I wasn't sure what I expected. A part of me wondered if he would come crawling back, offering empty apologies, but I had moved past that. I had moved past him. I took a deep breath before pressing the green button, not sure what I would hear on the other end. Lily, he said, his voice tight, unfamiliar. I've been thinking, maybe we can talk. I let out a small, bitter laugh. Talk? About what? About how you've lied and used me for years? I'm sorry, he said. I've made mistakes. You know that. But I'm still your husband. I cut him off. No, Victor. You don't get to keep saying that. You don't get to control me anymore. I'm done. There was a long silence, and I almost wondered if he would hang up. Instead, his voice came through, quieter now. I know I've hurt you. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm asking for one. I'm sorry. Please. It should have been tempting. A part of me wanted to believe it, but I'd spent so long holding on to something that wasn't real, something that had never been, and now I had my answer. It was time to let go. You're right, I said, my voice firm. You don't deserve another chance, and I don't need your apology to move on. I hung up before he could say anything more. I didn't need any more words. What I needed now was to move forward. The next morning, I packed up the rest of my things. There was a finality in the motion, a sense of peace that settled over me as I closed the door behind me, leaving behind a life that no longer served me. The house, the marriage, the promises, they were all gone. I wasn't sure where I was going yet, but I knew I was going somewhere new. I found myself standing in front of a small office building later that week, a flyer clutched in my hand. It was an advertisement for a business opportunity, something I had always dreamed of but never allowed myself to pursue. Maybe it was time to finally take that step. I pushed open the door and walked inside. The woman behind the desk looked up, smiling as she saw me approach. Hi. How can I help you today? I'm here to learn, I said, a small smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. I think it's time I start my own business. It wasn't just a business I was starting. It was my life. It was my future. As I left that building, a sense of accomplishment filled me. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path, and I was ready to see where it would take me. The past was behind me. It had shaped me, yes, but it no longer defined me. I had found my strength, and with that strength, I would continue to build the life I deserved. Hey, it's Lily here. You ever felt like you've been treated like you don't matter? That's how I felt at my sister-in-law's engagement party, where they called me a housekeeper. But you know what? I decided to play their game, and what happened next? They never saw it coming. I wasn't going to be invisible anymore, and trust me, they'd regret it. Hook 2. Ever been humiliated by your own family? At my sister-in-law's lavish engagement party, they called me a housekeeper. But instead of backing down, I played the part, and it was my turn to make them regret it. What happened next left my brother speechless. Want to know how I turned the tables? Stick around. This story is far from over.